Hey everyone, let's get started. Welcome to the Trello Agile series Sprint Board webinar. My name is Brian Servino. I'm the product marketing manager at Trello, and today I'm joined by our support specialist, Michael Lebrecht-Jessen, as well as Nikita Dyer and Jess Barnett, who are both product managers at Trello. So the goal of this webinar is to show how Agile and Scrum technologies can be applied to a workflow in Trello, and focusing on the Sprint Board. So full disclosure, I am not a Scrum Master, but I do think that anyone that is familiar with Agile and Scrum, or looking to get their feet wet with Agile Scrum will get a lot of useful information from this webinar. After the presentation, I'll be glad to answer any questions you have about how these ideas can be applied to your team. If you have any questions, please type them into the GoToWebinar question box, and I'll be addressing as many as possible during the time allotted, with help from Michael, Nikita, and Jess. So you can also email any questions to support@trello.com, and our support team will be glad to answer any questions that you have. And finally, I want to let you know that I will be recording today's webinar, and will email a copy of the recording to all attendees and registrants. I'll also be following up with links to the board that you can copy, as well as additional helpful resources like some blog posts and Chrome extensions and links. So first, let's quickly go over what Agile is and why I think Trello is a great tool for Agile and Scrum development sprints. So agilemethodology.org defines Agile, stating that Agile approaches help teams respond to unpredictability through incremental, iterative work cadences and empirical feedback. So this is achieved through repeated sprints, which are defined periods of time, usually 1 to 2 weeks, but could be up to 4, where set tasks, also called user stories, are defined and accomplished to constantly be driving more business value. So this means that a constantly refined and improved product is being delivered to the customer. Or as agilealliance.org puts it, these methodologies emphasize close collaboration between the development team and business stakeholders, frequent delivery of business value, tight, self-organizing teams, and smart ways to craft, confirm, and deliver code. Scrum is perhaps the most popular Agile methodology, and scrumalliance.org defines Scrum as a team-based approach to delivering value to a business. Team members work together to achieve a shared business goal. The Scrum framework promotes effective interaction between team members, so the team delivers value to the business. So why then Trello for Scrum and Agile workflows? First off is simplicity. Scrum is meant to be a simple and defined process to facilitate work getting done. That's where Trello comes into play as being a very simple tool that you can lay out and arrange your task and process however works for your team to get the most done. Perspective, at a glance, product owners, team members, and Scrum masters can see who's doing what and what still needs to get done during a sprint. Trello is collaborative, so everyone involved in the sprint can communicate and collaborate in real time, really no matter where they're located in the world. The flexibility, Trello can easily adapt to whatever workflow works best for your team to get the most done, as I mentioned, really letting you define the process for your team's unique structure and needs. And finally, it's customizable. Trello can integrate the apps that your team relies on most, saving time and energy since everyone knows where to access files, documents, code, and resources all in one centralized location. So let's dig into the Trello sprint board and see how your team can get agile today. And also want to mention that while a lot of these processes I'm talking about are maybe developer related, they can be applied to marketing teams or really any team. It's just mostly about setting up a process, an effective way to get things done. So this is a sprint board. This would be a very basic before a sprint has started board. And on this sprint board, I've kept it as simple as possible with only 4 lists. As you can see, I have the backlog list, which contains all the tasks that need to be accomplished and implemented. Items can remain in the backlog until they are prioritized by a stakeholder or a product owner, or until the task or user story, as they're often referred to in Agile development, is developed enough to become an actionable item. Next up, we have the sprint backlog. And these are the tasks that are ready to be completed during the next sprint. They're moved from the backlog list to the sprint backlog. And cards can be prioritized by the product owner by dragging the most important cards to the top of the list for a sprint. So basically what I'm doing here is, as the product owner, I'm moving cards over to our sprint backlog for what we want to get done over the course of the week in this next sprint. Next up is the in progress list. And so basically when a developer or member of the team starts a task, they drag a card to this list and assign themselves to the card by adding their avatar or their picture, their user to the card. One can also add a member from the back of the card. So now, if on your in progress list, if you're working on something and maybe you have a separate test team, the team member tasked with QA, they can be added to the card at this point in the in progress list when the developer is done with their first task, simply by also, as I mentioned, dragging them to the card. And when someone is ready for testing, you can simply just @mention the user, and it'll send them a notification so that they know that this task and this card is ready for testing. If the tester happens to find a bug, they can notify me on the card in a comment, and I can get back to work on it. And then I can also, once I finish that task, I can notify them again very easily through the back of the card. It's also you can also add labels to cards at this point in the process while you're working on in progress tasks for anything that is blocked. And or if there's a bug. So now anyone that's working on this board can see that I have a blocked task or a task with a bug. I can tell that the card that I'm working on, there's a bug. I can go into it and, as I mentioned, work on that card and fix that task. So once tasks are completed, they are moved to the list for the week of the current sprint, and simply by dragging them over. And having a separate list for each sprint helps product owners and stakeholders easily see what has been accomplished during each sprint. And so for each sprint, you'd want to create a new list where completed cards for that sprint would be moved to. So for instance, next week's sprint, I can simply click here and add a list for 9/16. And as I mentioned, you can set up lists however you want. You could include additional lists like resources for documentation, links, or commonly repeated tasks that you have template cards for. You might create a list for block tasks specifically, or which are being held up for one reason or another, such as an external factor like a required asset. You might set up a list for the QA process, so cards might go from in progress, where I might assign myself to a card, and then when I need testing, I can bring it to this list. And the great thing about this is that then if there's a bug and it needs to go back into some work on it, it can easily be just dragged back to this list. And when it's ready, I can then move it over to the QA testing list and finally to the done list. It's really about setting up the process that's best for you and your team. I would just recommend starting off with a simple board with 4 lists so that everyone on your team can easily grasp how the board works and keep its workflow visually clear, and then build it out from there if need be. I'm going to hop to a different version of this board where, as you can see, cards are maybe moved a little bit further along in the process. And just go over some, once again, keeping in mind that I have just my 4 lists for my process: the backlog, the sprint backlog, in progress, and the weekly done list. But as you can see, my team has now been working on tasks. We've pulled items over cards over in progress and are working on them. And as they get done, they'll be moved over to the done list. So I want to go into now in depth into the cards themselves and show how you can build better cards for this process. So cards represent tasks, as I mentioned, to be completed by a member of the team. And they could be considered user stories. And that's really, outline the tasks required maybe to build a new feature. So first I want to look at the card titles. Card titles should be short and concise, allowing anyone on the team to see in a glance, what the task is. This really is not an ideal title because this one over here, because there's a lot of text. It's really hard to just look at this board and understand exactly what's this task is about. Update CSS is really clear. We need to update the CSS for our websites. Verifying third-party APIs, a website redesign. These are really clear titles that help me understand what needs to be worked on it. So card descriptions allow the product owner or stakeholder to add more information to a card, specifying the details of what is to be developed or designed. And they can define the goals or outline the steps to do so. So this is a pretty more complicated card description. And you can always edit descriptions here. Just to go in to show you, really how you can plan out the process for getting this done. Everything that needs to be done here, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, any bugs and that might have come up along the way that need to be noted, and any intentional changes that are being done when updating this function in the app. They can also be much simpler. So for instance, the website redesign card description just kind of outlines what we need to do, and then we'll get into more detailed information maybe in the checklist or through attachments. And I'll get into that in just a second. One thing I do want to share real quick is, as you can see here, Trello cards, you can add Markdown to Trello cards. So as you see, I can bold and create bulleted lists. And to get information about Markdown, when you go into a card description to edit it, just click Formatting Help, and you can see all the ways that you can add Markdown to cards, as long as more complete syntax over here. So for instance, if I want to add a header, I can use Markdown here in the description, and it adds a header here. Same there. I can do bulleted list items really easily. And this just makes everything easier to read for everyone else on my team. So I'm going to dive into this card real quick, our website redesign card, and kind of show you some more features. So members really should be added to cards when they're either assigned a task or when they take on a task. And depending on the structure of the team and the task, you might have multiple members added to a card. So as I mentioned earlier, you can just click members and add someone, or you can simply just drag them from the menu. Labels provide additional visual information for cards, and also can be filtered, which is really convenient. So for agile workflows, cards can be labeled when blocked or when bugs are discovered in the QA process. Labels can also be used to signify if a task is urgent, or to categorize the types of tasks and where that task fits into the product. For instance, maybe if it's a security issue, or as I mentioned here, this is web related for the website redesign. Anytime there's a bug, that can quickly just be added to the card. And now everyone can look at this board and see there's a bug here. What's really great is that you can also filter these cards by label. So if I click filter cards, I can quickly surface which cards have bugs. I can click which are for web, or anything. I can also filter cards based on who's assigned to what. So I can see all the cards that Amy's working on, Andre, etc. You can also filter by when cards are going to be due. So that's a super helpful way to surface relevant cards. Also, a quick tip, and I know this might be information overload, so just luckily you'll be getting a recording of this webinar. But if you hit Q on the keyboard, that'll just surface and filter for all your assigned cards, which is super helpful way to just see all your tasks that you're working on and not be distracted by any other cards on the board. So once again, just hit Q for that, and you can Q to disengage it. I can also show you real quick just how to create and apply a label. We're going to call this testing for QA. I can pick the color. If I pick gray, that means it's going to act more like a tag on a card. It won't show up on the front of the card. It'll just show up on the card back, but you can still filter for those. And so now I have this testing QA card filter. Maybe because I fixed the bug. So I can easily remove filters, remove labels and add new ones to cards. So for tasks that require multiple parts, checklists can be created so that each subtask can be listed and checked off as it's completed. And you can create a new checklist right from the side of the card. You can name it whatever you want. And what's also really cool is you can copy checklist items from an additional card, from another card on the board. So for instance, if I have a process that needs to get done multiple times, I can add that checklist, which sadly that one had no items on it. Let me find a better checklist. I can add a checklist from another card. Here we go. And as you can see, now this checklist has been copied from another card. Also, while Trello does not support nested cards or nested tasks, other cards can easily be referenced on a parent card by copying and pasting the URL of a child card into a parent card, as seen here, into a checklist item. So to do that simply, all you have to do is copy and paste the card URL into a checklist item and save that. And what's great is, let's just say I have a couple tasks that need to get done in the website redesign, some subtasks before I can fully implement this. What I can do is any cards that are in my backlog that relate to this, for instance, let's just say updating the CSS is really relevant. I can add that item, and I can drag that right up here because that's the most important task. And now whoever's taking on the task of updating the website knows that we have to update the CSS first, can jump right in that card and work on this task. Once that's been completed, we simply just go back to our main card and check that off. And once everything's been done, we'll know that this task is completed. We've implemented all the designs, we've checked it, tested it, and we're going to launch. And now we can move this to done. Super helpful. So another great useful feature is due dates. Some might say in an agile process, you're not going to have due dates set, but while you might prioritize tasks by dragging certain tasks to the top of a list, due dates can also be used to help establish what cards need to be completed before others. So simply click due date, and if this card needs to be done tomorrow by noon, I could pick the date I want, but let's just say tomorrow by noon or 2 p.m. after lunch. Could save that. And now any member of the card, when a due date is added to a card, any member of the card will be notified that this due date has been added. And 24 hours before the card is due, they will also receive a notification that the card will be due in 24 hours. So oftentimes screenshots and bug reports, design mockups, or documents need to be referenced during the development process. And product owners and devs can easily attach files to cards directly from their computer or from popular cloud storage devices like Google Drive, Dropbox, Box, and OneDrive. And you can also even attach links from the internet. So attaching files from cloud storage device services like Google Drive, Dropbox, Box, etc., that means that the files will retain the permission settings that are set in the cloud storage service, which can provide an additional layer of security. So for instance, if permissions for a file are only approved in set in Google Drive, then when that file is added via Google Drive to this card, only people with those permissions will be able to access that file. Attaching to my computer, though, will upload that file. So for instance, if I want to attach a screenshot of an issue. I can upload this file. I can set it as a card cover if I want by default, which means it'll display at the top of the card, or remove that. And now anyone on the board can access this file and see exactly what was captured. You can also easily drag and drop files. Right to cards from your computer, from the web. Maybe also just to show you, if I want to reference a website, I can easily also attach that to a card. And I can name that Powerups site. And now anyone can easily just hop to that link. Just some useful ways to attach items to cards. Finally, the last thing I really want to go over on the card back that I think is an important feature is subscribing to cards. And this allows stakeholders can easily stay updated as specific cards progress from the backlog to the done list by subscribing to cards. And what that means is by subscribing to a card, instead of adding myself to this card, it keeps clear who is assigned the task. So if for me, as I subscribe this card, Priscilla is still assigned this task, but I want to be updated as to when this is going to be in a current week sprint and if it gets finished. And so by subscribing, there's no confusion as to who's in charge of the task, but it allows me to get notifications for all actions that occur on the card. You can also subscribe to lists. And if you want, you could subscribe to an entire board, although that could be a bit of an overkill when it comes to notifications. But maybe you just want to stay up to date, for what lists, for what gets done in a week. So you can subscribe that list. And now anytime a card is moved into that list, you'd get a notification that card has been moved to the done list. So those are some basic board features. I think there's also really some best practices to keep in mind and I'm going to get into power-ups and integrations in a moment. But before we get deep into that, I just also want to talk about some basic best practices. While we encourage teams to find the workflows that work best for them, these are just a couple tips that might help for some smoother sprints. Have a dedicated product owner that is in charge of leading each weekly sprint. As you can see here in the backlog, I created a card with, I added myself to it. The card name is my name. And I had a bunch of labels just to draw attention to it. You don't have to do that. But this way, the product owner is the person that's in charge of establishing the scope of each sprint and which cards should be moved from the backlog to the weekly sprint backlog. And this person should be the admin of the Trello board that sets up each sprint. Also, it makes it really convenient for anyone on the team to know who to go to if they have any questions, anything's blocked or any issues. So at the end of each sprint, there's also be something that is shippable. And that's kind of part of the product owner's role, is to define what that shippable item will be. You can invite any stakeholders to boards to observe a sprint so they can see what progress has been made. So if, say, you had a client awesome at Trello.com, you can just add a client to a board. And this way they can keep up on what's going on the board and where the progress is. One thing that's really cool with Trello Business Class is that stakeholders can be added to boards as observers and given only permissions to comment and vote on cards. So this prevents them from interrupting the sprint in any way by potentially changing any information on a card or moving a card. So with Business Class, what I could do is client awesomer. Let me make that email address. If I have Business Class, I can click invite this person as a view-only observer. And now this person will have observer status, which means they can only just view the board and leave comments and vote on cards. Maybe they'd want to add votes to cards for what features they'd like to see first, etc. Another good thing is to set up a basic point system in Trello by adding points to cards in parentheses to the card's name. As you can see here, I just added an 8. And really, points are estimates that measure the degree of difficulty for a task. And they're often based on the Fibonacci sequence, which is 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. It's basically the last number and the number preceding it added together. And it goes on and on. But it can be a way to quickly make sure your team is not overworked or overloaded with work during a sprint. And so the reason why you use a nonlinear system like the Fibonacci sequence is because true estimates are difficult to make. And the bigger the task, for instance, this one has a 21, a very large task, the bigger the task, the more uncertainty resolves around it. And so this system of using this the Fibonacci sequence recognizes that difficulty without producing a false level of confidence for the specific level of difficulty. And in a moment, I'm going to show you two useful items that can really help this process of adding points to cards. So as I just mentioned, product owners should really balance the workload of a sprint based on the amount of points for each card. And you'll get to understand the workload that your team can handle over the course of a couple sprints. You might not know right away, how much your team can get done. But once your team has been going through a few sprints, you'll be able to look at your points and get a good idea as to what can be accomplished over the course of a sprint. So during a scrum or a sprint, cards should always be moving all the time as tasks move from the sprint backlog to in progress to done. And daily stand-ups are essential to this process. And these are basically a stand-up is a stand-up meeting. The history is that they're considered to be meetings that 15-minute meetings essentially, where the length of time is determined as 15 minutes because basically no one wants to stand in a meeting for more than 15 minutes. But daily stand-ups are essentials process where each member of the team can say what they did yesterday, what they're going to do today, and if they have any tasks that are blocked that need to be addressed, that the product owner can help remove any blocks on. Also, every sprint should have a review. And this is different than a full retrospective on a product. What I mean by here is just each week, sprint, you can have a card that lists, what got done, what we need to adjust, do we need to adjust anything in the process, and do we need to update the backlog? So you can just create a card for each week. And team members can either add in the description or they can just add in a comment their feedback for the sprint review. So those are kind of just some best practices. I'm going to dive deeper now into some Powerups and integrations that will really take this process to the next level. So I'm going to switch to a board that has a bunch of Powerups enabled on it. And there are many ways that Trello boards can be customized to improve your team's sprints and workflow with Powerups, as well as browser extensions and third-party integrations. So what Powerups are located in the sidebar over here. And what Powerups do is Powerups add extra functionality to Trello boards by enabling additional features as well as integrations with other apps and services like GitHub, Slack, Google Drive, and more. And they're totally adaptable to your team's unique business needs. So every Trello team can enable one Powerup per team board. That's including free teams. And business class and enterprise teams get unlimited Powerups on their team boards. There are also a number of browser extensions and third-party integrations that can help the Agile and Scrum process that I'll go over in a few. Let me just share real quick in the chat box the link to our Powerups page. So you can see all the Powerups that we currently offer. We're also constantly adding more Powerups all the time. So if there's something that you want to see, if there's an app you'd love to see a Powerup for, just drop us a line at support@trello.com, and we'd love to know. So let me dive into some of these Powerups. Also, I should mention, to enable a Powerup in a board, simply click Enable, and then you can toggle any settings for that Powerup. I'm going to go into some of these Powerups right now to show you how to do that. First one I want to show is voting. So voting allows stakeholders to upvote features that interest them the most and help prioritize future sprints. And so Voting can take place, here on the sprint boards backlog, or maybe if you have a product planning board or roadmap board, which I'm actually going to go over in a future webinar, and I'll send you a link to that. But basically, for the voting power up, you can select members and observers, or team members only. As I mentioned earlier, I added some observers to this board who are stakeholders, so I'm going to allow them to vote as well. Now to vote on a card, all I have to do is simply open a card and click vote. And as you can see, my vote's been added to this card. You can also just mouse over a card and hit the V key on your keyboard to add a vote to a card or to remove a vote if you want to quickly upvote some cards. As I mentioned earlier, if you're applying due dates to cards, the calendar power up is really useful because it allows you to see those cards in a calendar view. So I'm going to quickly add just a couple due dates. And now with my calendar enabled, I can go right up here and click the calendar button. And I can see all these cards in a calendar view or in a weekly view. I can also view a card right from the calendar. And what's really cool is that I can also drag and drop cards on the calendar. And as you can see, the date updates. The calendar also has, each board's calendar has a unique iCalendar feed, which when enabled allows you to import your personal iCalendar feed into any external third-party calendar, such as Apple's calendar, Google, Microsoft Outlook. Simply copy this feed and import that into your external calendar. This way you can see all the due dates across all your boards in one place. Card aging on a board. By enabling card aging on your board, cards that have not been had not had any activity will fade over time. So as you can see here, by enabling that, I can quickly see which cards have not been moved over the course of a few weeks. This is useful in maybe surfacing cards in the backlog that might have fallen by the wayside and could require some reprioritization. If a card is moved and there's activity on it, it no longer has that faded look. And there's two options for card aging. This is the pirate mode, which I think is more fun because it displays kind of cards as a cracked pirate map. But you can also go to regular mode, which shows cards as faded out view, which might be more professional, you could say. The choice is yours. Another really great new power up is custom fields. And custom fields allows you to formalize, kind of allows you to formalize a process for your Trello cards by allowing you to set input fields, such as text, numbers, checkbox, dates, drop-down lists, and it allows you to also add that information as a card front badge. So what I actually already set up, really quick on here, I'm going to show you how to add a new field, but I'm going to show you a really cool feature with the custom fields regarding the points that I mentioned earlier. So on this board, I created a drop-down list. Okay, I got to turn off the card aging power up. It's a little disorienting. As you can see right here, these points. What I did was I set up custom fields on my board with a drop-down list. So I'm going to click this custom fields power up. And I have my numbers for points, for story points, all set up right here already. So I can just click the value, save that, and now it's added right here to the back of the card. I can also maybe change that if I think it's going to be more difficult. And so now I can see how many points are on the card. As you can see, now all these different cards have the amount of points that I've added to them. But you can get really, a lot of exciting things with custom fields. Let's just really quickly. You can also, real quick, you can edit the fields from the sidebar, but you can also add new fields right from the back of a card. So I can click the icon here. Maybe I want a checkbox for when cards are done. I want to see it on the card bot, front of the card. And now I can simply mark a card as done and save that. We see yes. We see on the front of the card that it's done. Perhaps I want, for bug reports, some more detailed information. So I want to know the operating system, and I want to know browser for some bug reports. So now if there's a bug, which operating system it's on Mac, in Chrome version 50, whatever version I might be using now. And now for this bug, someone can see how to reproduce this bug perhaps in the browser and on the right operating system. What's also really cool is you can actually customize the custom fields button. So I can make this for bug reports specifically. And now people know where to go if they want to file additional information for a bug report, let's say. So that's a really cool new Powerup we actually just released. We actually just today moved from beta into live card repeater. It's currently rolling out of beta and onto everyone's boards as we speak. So you might need to refresh Trello to see this on one of your Trello boards. But card repeater does exactly what it says. It repeats cards at set intervals. And this Powerup is super simple to set up, and it's really effective. For instance, perhaps I have weekly updates for my team, and I want to have a default template card. I can have all the members of my team for that weekly update. I have a little description here, and I just set that card to repeat, and I want it every week on Friday for weekly team updates. Or maybe I want daily updates throughout the work week. I can set that. I can also set, if I want monthly, depending when on the month, or yearly for certain, for tasks that I just want yearly check, maybe yearly check-ins. But right now, for my sprints, I think like weekly, whether it's daily status updates or weekly status updates. And I'm going to actually just set send repeat at 242, and that should repeat in just a moment. Also, I should also mention that I can pick where I want the card to repeat. So if I have a dedicated team meetings list, I might have a repeat here, but I could have a repeat on the sprint list for this week and where it's going to repeat. So I'm going to have actually set to repeat on my sprint list. And we should see in a few moments a card repeating, being copied right over here. What's really cool about card repeater is that this is a pretty simple card, but any checklists I have on the card will also be repeated, any attachments as well. So if you have basic processes set up maybe that you're regularly doing, maybe weekly QA checks or something, you can set up cards that will automatically repeat every week, so you don't constantly have to be creating that card or worry about copying that card every week. So that one is just released today, so you can start playing with that right now. For any developers, you'll probably enjoy the GitHub Powerup. So when the GitHub Powerup is enabled on your board, you can pick which repositories and add those repositories right to Trello. And now I can pull in from GitHub any branches, commits, issues, and pull requests right from any of those repositories that I added to my board. Hang on one second. I think I just need to refresh because I just made some changes. There we go. And the great thing about with the GitHub Powerup is that product managers can, in a single glance, They can look at a Trello board and see what commits have passed their GitHub checks or what code has been merged. And developers can easily access the code they need and coordinate with the rest of the team by attaching branches, commits, issues, and pull requests directly to cards. So as I mentioned, I can just click here, attach a branch, and that branch has been attached. I can also hop right into a pull request in GitHub and dive into that and start and get to my work. As usual, I seem to be taking up so much time at the webinar, and I want to be able to answer questions. So I'm going to just get through these next power-ups really quickly. Slack is another really popular power-up. These days, as we're going through a revolution in team communication, more teams go remote, and the office landscape kind of changes. So with the Slack power-up enabled, which I'm going to enable, it makes it possible to seamlessly bring your Trello cards directly into your Slack team for brainstorming sessions or for quick feedback or to get updates. So I can set here the channel that in my Slack team that I want to associate with my Trello board. So this is for the sprint channel, so I'm going to save that. And now anytime I can just go right into a card, and I can send that to the sprint channel real easily or any other channel. I can send a card to anyone via direct message. So I'm going to send that to my sprint channel. I can go right to the channel. And as you can see, that card has been sent here. With the Trello app for Slack enabled on a board, then any team member can join the card. They can subscribe. We can attach conversations or labels or due dates to a card, all right from Slack. And it's also, you can also, if you're working on something, you can hop directly into Slack by clicking the channels associated with the board, the badge up here, and I can hop right to my Slack channel. And what's also really cool is that you can set reminders in Slack from the back of a Trello card. So if I want to remind myself about this card, let's say something that's in the backlog that I need to get to, I can remind myself about this card in a day. And on a day, I'll get a Slack notification for that. Okay, remember that card before that I set to repeat? As you can see, this card has been copied from the card repeater Powerup, and I'll just go in here and just modify that title for this week. And now I don't have to worry about setting up this card. And we have our weekly update card all ready to go for the week. So that's the card repeater in action in real time. Let's see. I mentioned you can attach documents and folders with Google Drive, Dropbox, and Box. We actually have power-ups that add even more information and functionality to attaching files. So for instance, the Google Drive power-up. Let's see if I go to this card. As you can see, with the Google Drive power-up, I can actually attach files and folders directly from Drive, and I can create and attach new folders from a card. I can hop right into Drive to access these files directly from the Trello card. And if I want to create a new file, for instance, create a new folder, you can click Create Folder. And of course, right now the folder is empty. I can hop into Drive. I can add my screenshots. And next time I open this card, it'll pull in all that information right from Google Drive. Super convenient. Let's see, a couple more real quick. If you use FogBug's, Help Scout, Zendesk, or Intercom for managing cases, tickets, and feature requests, we have power-ups for those. To save time, I'm just going to show the Zendesk power-up. So the Zendesk power-up enabled on your board allows you to attach tickets and views directly to a Trello card, which is great for keeping track of any bugs or feature requests. And so tickets attached to cards display the name of the ticket and a preview of the body of the ticket, the text, and who the ticket is assigned to, and when the ticket was last updated. You can also attach Zendesk views to cards to get a higher level perspective on the number of tickets open in your group, how many tickets you have, and more, which can provide valuable insight to stakeholders and product owners. Also, card fronts will have a badge displaying the number of tickets attached to the card, and this can be helpful if you want to, at a glance, see which user stories to prioritize for the next sprint. Right here I see this badge for Zendesk that has 3 tickets attached to it. So that might be something I want to prioritize because obviously it's a big feature request. And you can attach tickets and views easily from Zendesk. Fogbugs and the others mentioned, like Intercom and Help Scout, work in a very similar way. It's all about which app is best for you. So we also have Screenful, Trello, Elegant, and Burndown for Trello, which are great in the dev process. They provide dashboards for burndown charts, cumulative flow diagrams, and Gantt charts, which are essential ways to visualize your team's progress during a sprint. And each of these boards creates a visual dashboard displaying key insights from the progress on your sprint board, and they're accessible right from the Trello board. So with the Screenful Powerup enabled, I can click and create a dashboard for the sprint. Ideally, I'd be creating a dashboard before my sprint starts, but just to show you on this board, I can authorize my app, and I'm going to set up. So what I'm going to do is set up my lists here. So for any lists that are going to have open tasks, I'm going to move them to this. In progress, open, and my done list. And I'm going to set up my sprint. Looks good. Set the dates for the start and everything. Start my sprint. And now I can go into my dashboard and get a visualization of the burn down chart, see how many tasks are open and in progress and done. Cumulative flow, which doesn't look very impressive right now because I haven't done much on this board. Milestone burn ups, completed tasks and how they're moving along, and get lead time information. So that's a Screenful Powerup. As I mentioned, Trello, Elegant, and Burndown for Trello operate in a similar way. And finally, if you have, as mentioned earlier, daily stand-ups, which are an essential part of a sprint, more and more teams are going remote, and it's becoming more and more important to have tools available to still effectively hold daily stand-ups. And so whether your team uses Google Hangouts or Join Me or Appear In, these Powerups allow you to set a dedicated place for your team to go for daily stand-ups and retrospectives directly from your Trello board in a single click. So I'm going to show you the Appear In. I'm going to enable that for this board. And I'm going to have a dedicated room name. So I can pick, let's see, I'm going to do Trello Team Sprint and update that. And now my team can quickly hop into Appear In chats right from the back of the board. And you can, hey, this is me in my home studio, home office. But anyway, anyone can just hop in right from the Trello board and hop into a daily stand-up. Super easy, super convenient. So anyway, as I mentioned, to check out more about Powerups, go to trello.com/powerups. And I enter that into the chat information. And as I mentioned, every team gets 1 free Powerup per team board. If you would like to get unlimited Powerups and more features, I'd recommend checking out Trello Business Class. And I'm going to enter that into our chat. And real quickly, mention 2 Chrome extensions. One is Scrum for Trello that allows you to add points 2 cards, and it'll actually calculate those points in the top of your list, so you can quickly see how many points are in each list. And Kanban whip for Trello might be useful too. This allows you to set work in progress limits. So you can set a limit so that, say, if a list has 6 cards in it, that's too many, and it'll change color to red. This list here is set to 5, and you can see it's a yellow warning that there's too much work in progress and we shouldn't add any more cards to the list. And sorry to speed up the demo on those. I want to be able to get some Q&A in. I know it's getting late and there's a lot of information here. That wraps up my presentation on the Agile Sprint board. I want to remind everyone that while the context of these cards has been more developer focused, any team can consider applying these concepts to their workflow. For instance, marketing teams could apply these methodologies for content creation or for client-based work. I'm going to get the Q&A started right now. I also want to let everyone know that I'll be hosting a follow-up webinar in this series that's going to be covering road mapping and retrospectives. And that'll be on Thursday, October 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern. So you can sign up for that on our webinars page, which I will put right into chat. And I hope to see you there. So I'm going to focus now on questions about the sprint and the sprint board and any of the features mentioned. If we run out of time, please email any questions to support@trello.com, and we'll be glad to get back to you with really in-depth responses. Apologize once again for this webinar running long. Also, you should receive a copy of the recording of this webinar in the next few days, and please feel free to share it with the rest of your team. So thanks again, everyone, for taking the time to join me today. If you got to hop off, we have some lingering questions, just email us, support@trello.com. And let's see. Oh, it looks like there's actually not that many questions. Apparently, Jess, Nikita, and Mike have done a tremendous job. The one question I see here is, can you get a tally for number of points associated for cards in each column? Agile has a target number of points per sprint. So that's where the Scrum for Trello Powerup or extension might be useful. Is being able to, because it automatically will add all these points. As I mentioned here, when using custom fields, you just see them here. So it's not going to change right away. It's not going to update on the list. You'd have to manually do that. I do want to bring that up with our team, though, our dev team, to see if maybe we can create a power up or a feature that can be enabled with points in Trello, like maybe a points specific power up that will add that to the top of the list. So thanks for asking about that. I'll definitely bring that up. Someone asked if I have an example for content creation using Scrum in a Trello board. There's actually a blog post we just recently released. I'm going to add to chat. This actually shows, this blog post kind of covers beginner's guide to Scrum and Agile for project management in general, but he actually is on a marketing team. And so you can kind of get an idea of how this might work in a marketing process. Let me see if I can find real quick. Here's also another blog post. This is from The Magistrate, which is a design firm, on how they used, for marketing, how they used the Trello and Scrum. So those are in chat, 2 super informative articles. Let's see. Oh, someone asked if there's a public board like this that'll be shared. Yes, I do have a public board available, or I will just clean up this board and make it look much nicer. But you'll definitely be getting a version of this board that you can copy. And that'll be sent out in the email. Let's see. What is a roadmaps webinar going to be about? Good question. Mostly we're going to be covering about how to kind of set up maybe roadmaps in Trello, whether that's planning epics and stories, feedback, feature requests from customers, how to put that all together and create a workflow for a product roadmap that you would then use to base sprints off of. And then also I want to cover in that same webinar retrospectives, which would be going through with your team at the end of each sprint and covering what was done well, what could be done better, and what changes need to be made, and just showing up how to set up a retrospective board. Also, my colleagues Jess Barnett and Nikita Dyer will be invaluable in that because Jess Barnett has written some amazing thought pieces on how to set up Trello retrospective boards. So you'll be hearing from her as well, hopefully during that webinar. Let's see, a couple more questions. And how do you just handle a problem? Someone asked, this might be a little, whoever asked about handle a program which has been developed using waterfall and part agile. If you don't mind emailing us, support@trello.com on that one. That one might be a little more involved in the time I have. But if you're curious to know developing a process for waterfall and agile, we can help answer that. Let's see. Sprint question. For the sprint columns, example 99, the sprint lists, do you typically just keep adding sprints until it goes on forever? Or do you archive them after a certain point? That's really up to you. I find that it's easier to archive lists after a certain point. Maybe after each quarter, you might want to archive lists, these lists of what's been done. And the great thing is that if I archive a list, I can always go back to the archive for my board. And if I need to reference that list, I can always just send that right back to the board and access any of the cards on that. I can also, if a list is archived, but there's a card I want to search for, what was that? A card on that? Decouple something is archived. I can find that. Here we go. Here's that card that's currently archived. And I can access that card, and send that list back to the card, or just be able to search for that card that's been archived. I think it depends on, if you find it cluttering to have too many lists on a board, then you should certainly archive your lists. Someone asked, is there a maximum number of power-ups before it becomes too much? I don't think so. I think, you should really enable the power-ups that are useful to you. And any apps. I'm really going overboard, for the sake of setting up being able to demo a bunch of power-ups on one board. So I have a bunch enabled here, but we have some boards at Trello that easily have maybe a dozen power-ups enabled. And they all provide valuable information for the apps we use. It allows us to easier get information much easier. So yeah, I wouldn't say that any certain amount of power-ups is too much to enable on your board. I think it's really just, make sure you're using the power-ups that help your workflow. If something becomes cluttering and not useful, then maybe it's best to disable it. And let's see, that looks like the bulk of the questions. Then we're at 3 o'clock, so that's perfect. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. Apologies for not having those slides visible. Not sure what happened with GoToWebinar in the beginning, but I'll make sure to add those into the recording. Also, thank you so much for Mike, Nikita, and Jess in the background. Everyone give them a round of applause at home for being so awesome and helping. And hope to see you at the Roadmaps and Retrospectives webinar. You can sign up for that now at trello.com/webinars. So anyway, have a great day, everyone, and take care.